In the contemporary world, shaped significantly by the ideology of romanticism, the prevailing advice is to trust our feelings when it comes to choosing a partner. Love, as we commonly understand it today, is seen as a shared, almost mystical ecstasy. It's about finding a person who is not only beautiful in appearance but also has a soul that resonates with ours, someone with a rare capacity to make us profoundly happy. The romantic mindset, which has become the standard approach to love in much of the modern world, sounds warm, inviting, and tender. It feels like a recipe for happiness and emotional fulfillment. The founders of this romantic ideology certainly imagined that it would put an end to the kind of unhappy and pragmatic relationships that were commonplace in the past. They believed that a focus on feelings, passion, and personal connection would eradicate the problems that often came with more traditional ways of finding a partner, methods like arranged marriages, which were sometimes more about politics and social status than about personal compatibility. However, the problem with this romantic notion is that it encourages us to put immense trust in our feelings that are not always reliable. We are taught to honor the special emotions that arise when we meet certain people, whether it's in a bustling nightclub, a quiet train station, a lively party, or through a dating app. These moments, when we feel a strong emotional connection, are often celebrated and glorified in romantic novels, movies, and art. Yet, despite the beauty of these ideals, romanticism has not necessarily made us any happier as a society. In many ways, it's created unrealistic expectations and left us struggling to find relationships that live up to the fantasy. The limits of romantic instinct. There's another school of thought that comes not from romanticism, but from psychotherapy, a field that has a different take on the matter. Psychotherapy challenges the romantic idea that our instincts will always lead us to the right partner. Instead, it suggests that our instincts might actually lead us astray, guiding us not to those who will make us happiest, but to those who feel familiar. And therein lies the problem. According to this view, we don't necessarily fall in love with people who will take care of us in the best possible ways. Rather, we are drawn to those who care for us in ways that feel familiar, and sometimes, familiar doesn't mean healthy or nurturing. Our understanding of love is often modeled on the first experiences of love we had as children, and those experiences are rarely perfect. For many of us, the love we encountered in childhood was mixed with difficult emotions. The need to support a parent who was struggling, the anxiety of not feeling securely loved, or the discomfort of dealing with someone else's unpredictable anger. Seeking familiarity over happiness. As adults, we may consciously believe that we are searching for happiness in love, but in reality, we often gravitate towards what is familiar, even if it is not good for us. We look to recreate the feelings we knew in childhood, even if those feelings were tied to complicated or even painful dynamics. Love, for many of us, is linked with a sense of longing, with the desire to help someone who seems out of control, or with the feeling of trying to gain approval from someone who might not give it freely. These patterns can lead us to choose partners who replicate the emotional landscape of our early years. For example, if our childhood home was a place where warmth was given inconsistently, we might find ourselves oddly attracted to people who are emotionally distant or aloof. We may convince ourselves that these individuals are deep or mysterious, when in reality, they may just be perpetuating a cycle of emotional withholding that we know all too well. On the other hand, if we grew up with a parent who was overly critical, we might end up in relationships where we feel the constant need to prove ourselves, mistaking criticism for care. The problem with over-reliance on instinct. Our instincts, then, are not always trustworthy guides to happiness. They are shaped by past experiences, particularly those of our early years, and they can lead us to seek out relationships that are not necessarily good for us. The very traits that seem to draw us to someone may be tied to unresolved emotional patterns from the past. To choose partners more wisely, we need to be aware of how these unconscious drives influence our feelings. One way to start is by asking ourselves what types of people, in the abstract, tend to turn us off and what kinds excite us. It's helpful to make connections between these preferences and the people who first taught us about love, typically our parents or early caregivers. We might discover that we have been unconsciously drawn to certain traits because they feel normal, not because they are what will bring us true happiness. Reflecting on our emotional history. To choose well in love, it is crucial to examine our emotional history. It's about understanding that our attractions are not as free as we might like to think. They are influenced by childhood experiences, the dynamics of our family, and our earliest encounters with affection and rejection. Once we start recognizing these patterns, we can begin to see how they limit our choices and why we might repeatedly find ourselves in similar kinds of relationships, even if those relationships don't bring us the fulfillment we crave. This reflection is not about blaming ourselves or our parents. Rather, it's about gaining insight into why we are drawn to certain people. With this understanding, we can begin to challenge our instincts and open ourselves to partners who might feel less familiar but are actually better suited to making us happy. It's about learning to distinguish between the adrenaline rush of a new, but possibly unhealthy attraction and the steadier, calmer feeling of a genuinely good connection. Challenging our initial reactions. It's also important to challenge our initial reactions when meeting someone new. Just because someone doesn't give us that immediate spark doesn't mean they aren't right for us. In fact, that spark might be a sign that old, unhealthy patterns are at play. Learning to appreciate different qualities in a partner, such as reliability, kindness, and emotional maturity, might require us to step outside of our comfort zone. These qualities might not feel as exciting at first because they don't replicate the dynamics we grew up with, but they can lead to more stable and satisfying relationships. Conversely, if we find ourselves immediately rejecting someone because they seem too nice or too stable, it's worth exploring why those qualities make us uncomfortable. Are we confusing stability with boredom? Are we mistaking kindness for weakness? Often, our reactions are not about the person in front of us but about the scripts we carry from the past. Balancing heart and mind in choosing a partner. Choosing a partner well involves a delicate balance between following our hearts and using our minds. It's about honoring our emotions but also questioning them, understanding where they come from, and deciding whether they are leading us in the right direction. This might mean taking the time to get to know someone better before committing or being willing to walk away from an intense attraction that doesn't feel healthy. Ultimately, the goal is to become more aware of our relationship patterns and to make choices that align not only with our desires but also with our long-term well-being. It's about moving beyond the narrow definitions of love we might have learned in childhood and being open to new ways of connecting, ways that can lead to genuine happiness, not just familiarity. Learning to love differently. Understanding our emotional history and its impact on our choices can help us expand the range of people we find attractive. We might discover that the qualities we like and those we fear can coexist in different configurations than what we experienced in our early years. A person who is reliable doesn't have to be boring. Someone who is kind doesn't have to be weak. The more we understand the dynamics that shaped us, the freer we become to form healthier and more fulfilling relationships. In the end, love is not about finding a perfect match who magically fulfills all our needs without effort. It's about understanding ourselves deeply enough to make wiser choices and to build a relationship that grows and evolves over time. This approach might not have the immediate thrill that romanticism promises, but it offers something deeper, the possibility of a love that is genuine, lasting, and truly nourishing.